Can the Indian military upgrade their weapons and tactics before it's too late to deter a potential conflict with China at their border? Boy, I hope so. Getting drafted for World War III would be super inconvenient. If you weren't aware, the Indian Army is in the middle of a massive emergency military reorganization plan called the Future Infantry Soldier as a System, or FINSAS. FINSASy? Which promises to upgrade the regular Indian infantrymen in three main categories: protective gear, primary weapon, and electronic accessories, effectively taking them from the 1980s into the modern era. On top of all of that, they're doing a major top-down shift in doctrine that we'll get into later in the video. But the problem here that they're dealing with is years of delays and budget negotiations that have jeopardized the success of all the upgrades, all while China marches forward. RUSI Military and Intelligence Research Fellow Mark Phillips said, quote, "In the Indian Army, civil servants maintain considerable control of financing. Bureaucrats focus on the process of decision-making instead of the outcome." Isn't bureaucracy the best? We should really just have the DMV run the military. It's nice to know that some red tape out there is still uncuttable. For instance, the Indian Army has had all kinds of delays working with the Russians, where they've been trying to replace their decades-old INSAS rifle. It's proving incredibly difficult to get a new AK-203 manufacturing plant all set up in their country. So the Indian Army just decided to straight up say F and acquire over 100,000 SIG-17s in the meantime. In this video, I want to prove once and for all that chicken tikka masala is actually an Indian dish, not a British one. Wait, no, that's a different video. In this one, I want to examine the Indian military and their modernization effort. If you like getting your defense information from a washed-up former average infantryman, then fire around at that like and subscribe button. So why is it important to the whole world that the Indian Army successfully upgrade? What's at stake here? Nothing too important, just freedom. Since India got their independence from Britain in 1947, they've been dealing with violent disputes all along their border with Pakistan and China. In 1959, India granted asylum to the Dalai Lama after China occupied Tibet. This led to the 1962 Sino-Chinese War, where they battled it out at elevations as high as 16,000 feet in freezing temperature with horrible weapons that jammed. They had canvas shoes for cold weather gear. India lost their strategic objectives and they lost some land. It was a wake-up call. They needed to upgrade their military to protect their newfound country. Over the past 20 years, there have been many low-intensity conflicts, especially in the mountainous Ladakhi region, where in 2020, you probably remember seeing footage of the Indian and Chinese army literally duking it out right at the border, throwing punches with both sides suffering dozens of casualties. If you were like me, you were probably wondering why professional military troops were using fisticuffs and not firearms. Well, it's because of a 1996 treaty that had forbidden anything other than melee. What's stopping us from making that law in every war? Just determine every winner through like a giant UFC match. Well, I for one think it's poetic that this is the one place in the world that we could go from throwing low-tech fists one second to nukes the next. God help us. In light of these recent conflicts, the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, recently made a risky move. He decided to cozy up to the US and NATO. The partnership between the two countries was a no-brainer. We both love democracy and we both love Hollywood. The biggest part of their military modernization effort is adding combined operations, that fighting doctrine, to their repertoire. And the US military is the GOAT at combined ops warfare. I sound like a boomer saying that term. At the same time, the Indian Army is the greatest of all time at mountain warfare. No offense to the 10th Mountain Division, but the Himalayas are a little bit higher than the Adirondacks. The Indian and US military meet yearly to cross-train and learn each other's deepest, darkest secrets. What I mean is they learn each other's military strategies. Future battles will be determined by India's ability to coordinate between their Army, Navy, and Air Force. So why hasn't India already been doing that? Well, it turns out there's a very good reason for the delay of integration. In an article for Bloomberg written by Sodhi Ranjan Sen, he said it best when he said, quote, "Over the decades, Indian leaders kept military command and control divided to avoid coups that were once common in a neighborhood, while bureaucrats and military officials have resisted proposals for unification that have been around since the 1990s, mostly due to turf wars. The current structure is proving a disadvantage in countering China." So the three Indian military branches weren't coordinating to avoid infighting where they might throw a coup and overrun the government. This integration isn't as easy as it sounds though. It's not as simple as just getting all the Indian officers and generals in one room and having them bond over making jokes at the expense of the lower enlisted, which is how I imagine all officers' meetings go. Remember, as of a few years ago, India is now the world's largest military with a strength of over 1.2 million troops. But military analysts point out that this force is bloated and under-equipped, so at least I have that in common with the Indian military. So the three branches have to get past this hurdle of having this tradition of being walled off from one another. The Indian Department of Military Affairs ordered the Indian Army to draw up a plan for integrating with the Navy and Air Force and their operating structures by 2024. The Indian government has stayed kind of hands-off and they haven't interfered with the feuds between the three services. So the Army has been able to get a little carried away and they've had 60% of the military funding while sacrificing the Air Force and Navy budgets. Here in the US, we found the best way to integrate the branches is by simply creating memes making fun of each other. Nothing builds unit cohesion better. The Indian Army really has no way for the Air Force to talk to the Army. So for instance, in 2019, one of their jets destroyed an enemy base in Pakistan, at which point the Indian Army was put on alert, but they had no idea what was going on or how to react. By consolidating under one single office, the Chairman Joint Staff Committee, it'll help cut costs and help with this consolidation. I know it's scary when things join forces. It's like when Walmart took everything over. You don't know how powerful it's gonna become, but they have to take their chance. Quick update on the main point of the video. I found out that legend has it, chicken tikka masala was actually invented by an Indian chef, but while he was in Britain. Now they just need to figure out how to turn that into a good MRE. So what's China's strategy here that the Indian Army needs to counter? Ashley Tellis, senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for the International Peace, said that one of the techniques that the Chinese military is using on the border is referred to as salami slicing, where they slowly encroach on tiny sections of the enemy territory over a long period of time. As an Italian, I feel a little bit disappointed that I didn't know about the salami slicing military term. I can't wait till China uses the secret Italian military tactic of the prosciutto push. So India needs to be able to counter these low-intensity probing missions. Specifically, the Indian Army needs to invest in upgrading their regular soldiers, because these clashes are often determined by the will and skill of the troops. More so than anywhere, because of the extreme terrain, high elevations, and low temperature, which is prohibitive for vehicles. The disputed border along the Himalayan mountains comes down to soldier versus soldier, mano a mano. The Indian infantry famously fights on the world's highest battleground, sometimes reaching elevations over 17,000 feet above sea level. How's that for a game of King of the Hill that I would never want to play? One of the major challenges that the Indian Army faces is with getting rid of their old 1998 INSAS 5.56 weapons, which were found to jam frequently at these high altitudes in cold weather. They even had cracking in their polymer magazines, and their weapons would fire on fully automatic when they were actually set to burst. Cold does crazy things to military equipment. In 2007, the original plan by the Indian Army was to develop an entirely new rifle that had interchangeable barrels so troops could switch between the 5.56 and the 7.62 on the fly. But this fell through, and they instead had to order 100,000 regular old AK-47s instead. This was because they had an emergency and they just needed a rifle that would work and be reliable in the cold temperatures. Since then, they've abandoned trying to reinvent the wheel. Instead, they're working to acquire the Russians' AK-203, which is chambered in the 7.62 by 39mm instead. And that's kind of weird because at this point, that's an old military cartridge that no one feels like is better than the 5.56, so it's strange to see them going back to that old ammo type. I think it's to save money and use that old ammo. They'll be able to actually trust the AK-203 though, that's the main point. It won't break apart or jam. So to make sure we're all on the same page here, yes, the Russian army is arming the Indian army against the Chinese army, and at the same time, the Indian army is working with the United States to acquire the SIG 716I. It's a direct impingement 7.62 by 51mm weapon, but I can't help but feel like the Indian army is a little unsure what type of caliber they want to use and what type of weapon. They have bullpups, the Tavor, they have 5.56, they have 7.62. It feels a little like they're unsure which caliber is the right way to go. But they're cutting corners at the same time. They're getting ammo and optics from really cheap sources. Well, my message to the Indian Army about that is simple. I understand where you're coming from. I've been down that road. I've ordered cheap Amazon equipment thinking I'd save money, and then I ended up with garbage and I had to pay double to get decent stuff. In another sign of trouble for the Future Soldier program, the Indian Army Vice Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Philip Campos, announced in 2015 that they would split up the FINS program into two separate programs. The first will work to replace their assault rifle and personal equipment, and that contract's valued at over $600 million, while the second part will be a battle management system, which includes a computer and communications devices. For the first part of the program, it will include the new uniforms that will have an internal heating and oxygen system. The Indian Army historically used the best and worst helmets available. The uniquely Indian invention of the Pack-to helmet offers amazing front and side protection, but zero top protection. It claims to be able to stop a 7.62 round. Am I the only one that thinks that Star Wars ripped off this helmet? It looks the same. Then they use this ancient 1974 fiberglass helmet that they're planning to replace with the IHIPS as soon as possible. It'll also feature a vest with sensors to monitor their health and get them quick medical relief, finally making it so the soldiers don't have to take the time to memorize a 9-line medevac card. Indian infantry will finally be getting 180,000 units of level 4 body armor. If you look at their military and all of their videos and their equipment, a lot of their soldiers don't have body armor yet, so it's going to be great that they're getting this. They're also going to be getting a radio for each soldier and it'll be connected to a GPS. They even want to add solar charging devices to each uniform because of how fast batteries die in the cold. Each Indian soldier will be equipped with a USB 2.0 palm-top GPS navigation device, which is hooked up to a secured radio and electronic warfare data manager. This is absolutely key to the success of the Indian Army's combined operations shift in doctrine, so upgrading the soldier on the ground is also related to the changes in doctrine. It'll let them transfer text messages so they can make plans for combat and at the same time make plans for drinks after work. Wait, I'm not done yet. We still need to answer why it's taking suspiciously long for the Indian Army to implement these advancements. And truly, I just need someone else to share this new unhealthy obsession I have with the Indian Army. No one else understands me but you. My girlfriend doesn't want to hear one more Indian Army fact. To really understand the Indian military-industrial complex, you need to understand that they've had some cases of corruption that have since overshadowed it. Now obviously I'm not one of those edgelords who's against the military-industrial complex. You know the type, the one that pretends that much of the technology that makes our life easy today wasn't actually born out of military programs, but at the same time there is some shady going on out there sometimes. In the 1980s and 1990s, many prominent Indian and Swedish government officials were accused of accepting kickbacks from Saab Bofors for military upgrade programs. Since then, India has wanted to keep the involvement of private military defense companies to a minimum. They want to keep it all in-state, and they want to keep it inside their borders. So the Indian companies like Tata Advanced Materials and Tata subsidiaries like Nelco are working on their night vision and body armor, but this favoritism for public organizations like the DRDO is holding back their ability to be efficient. Defense analyst Mark Phillips said, quote, "Government policies towards private sector participation in defense industry prevent the emergence of vibrant alternatives to state-run enterprises. As a result, the Indian military is beholden to the government-run DRDO, whose performance is a matter of debate and controversy," which is a really nice, polite way of saying public government-run institutions in India aren't very good at producing military equipment. So these corruption investigations in India are part of the reason why it's taken from 2007 to 2022 for them to be able to really start moving on the FINS program. With the procurement of the SIG 716s, that's the real first tangible sign of progress. So in conclusion, the Indian Army remains the world's most formidable mountain fighting force. They rely on their massive size as their main deterrence in war. They've historically taken a defensive position, but with the rise of the Communist Party in China right at their neighborhood in their backyard, they're having to seriously rethink some of their old doctrine, like having military branches separated to avoid coups. It remains an open question whether they're going to be able to acquire the AK-203 and body armor in large numbers. But the next 2 or 3 years will really be make it or break it for the Indian Army, and I have faith in them based on their historical track record. I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy. Thank you for watching. Check out another episode while you're here.